Welcome to the Clarity Podcast, where we inspire listeners to live a life by design, not by default. Today, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Corey Hirsch, a therapist, mindset consultant, divorce mediator, and a former lawyer who brings a wealth of experience in personal growth and mental clarity. Corey is currently working on a book about people pleasing and learning how to be healthy, selfish. Through her years of experience, she's developed a model for personal growth that emphasizes defining a clear value-based why, leveraging the compound effect, and learning how to look up to yourself so you can fully embrace self-love and connection with others. Dr. Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. So, Dr. Corey, your work spans from therapy, mindset consulting, and mediation. How do you define clarity, and why is it such a crucial element in personal growth?
Clarity and by the way, you can call me Corey. You don't need to call me Dr. Corey. But clarity in personal growth, I believe, is all about authenticity. It's about living according to your values. You pretty much summed it up. Living according to your values and your desires, even if other people don't understand it. Because when we are living in accordance with our values and our desires, we are showing up as our best self. There's a spiritual component to it also, that we show up as our highest self when we are fulfilling our value set and living our life in accordance with that. Now, sometimes that might mean disappointing others, which is a really hard thing for a lot of us because we're taught to put other people ahead of ourselves. But when we do that, there's great chance that there's going to be a developing resentment or feeling like a victim, like maybe we do so much and what do other people do for us? And if we were just living according to our values and taking care of ourselves first, we wouldn't have those feelings.
You emphasize people pleasing, like that's a common thing. And I know in our previous conversation, you talked about it's a trauma response. Can you talk to us more about that? Where does it originate from and how does it show up as an adult?
Okay, yeah. So it's not every situation that develops this way, but a lot of us have been taught there's this ideal in our community that we should put others' needs before ours. And when we're children and parents are telling us that, or we are sort of programmed to perform for our parents in order to get our parents' attention, we learn to people please. And then as adults, we continue to do that behavior. Let me go back to childhood. And that is that we are animals at our core, and we adapt to any situation that we're in. If we are not met, attachment theory, in order to develop a secure attachment to our primary caregivers, we need to feel seen and heard and understood just the way we are from the moment we're born. So that means that it's not asking for a perfect mom or dad, but it's a mom or dad or a caregiver who responds to our needs, who responds to our cues. So if we're crying, tries to help us figure out what's going on. Are we hungry? Do we need to be held? Are we scared? And when parents aren't responding that way, we adapt to the situation. And so we might, if we hear those kinds of phrases like "don't cry, stop acting like a baby," or "don't cry, it's not that big of a deal," our personalities are compressed and we learn to hold back on who we really are. And that creates an attachment trauma where we learn to live our lives according to what other people want from us or what we perceive what other people want from us. And we never fully fulfill our true authentic selves coming from that perspective. And so when we take that into adulthood, we learn to be codependent. We learn to put other people ahead of ourselves. We learn to get uncomfortable with taking care of our needs because we are taught, it's so ingrained in us that we're not supposed to do that. I don't know if that made sense, but
that made perfect sense. We don't take care of our own needs, and that suppresses our personality. And I know you're writing a book about people pleasing and the idea of healthy selfishness. Can you explain what this concept means and why it's important?
Absolutely. So when we think of selfishness, well, let me go back. There's a continuum. There's selflessness and I think that we should never be selfless, because when we're selfless, we're less than ourselves. And I don't know anybody who wants to be less than themselves. So that's one side of the continuum. And then on the other side of the continuum is what we think of as selfishness. And that means disregarding other people's feelings, only doing whatever we want to do, and really having no disregard for the world around us. Okay. And so that's the continuum. But our community thinks of selfish as being this very black and white kind of a thing. What I'm suggesting is that there's a middle ground, a healthy selfishness where we can think about others, but also think about ourselves. And when we live in that space, the world is all good because we show up as our true selves. We're taking care of our needs first. We're acting like a fully whole adult, but then we can also show up and take care of other people from that perspective, from that point of view as well, from that position as well, because our needs are being satisfied. So we're solid and grounded and fulfilled. And then we have leftover energy to take care of others as well, if we want to, if it feels good to us.
Yeah, you said something. I want to go back to that. You said selflessness or selfless is thinking less of ourselves and no one wants to feel that. What stories, what situations or experiences has shaped your perspective to like have this paradigm? Because that is countercultural and actually uncommon. So when you said that, my ears perked up. I was like, hold on, run that back a little bit. Tell me more about that.
It's an unusual idea. Well, so for me personally, I am a recovering overachiever. Really felt I was a middle child. I am a middle child, and I really felt like my self-worth depended on me achieving. So I did really well in school. I got a bunch of degrees, more degrees than anybody needs. It became like achievement became sort of a maladaptive coping skill because my whole identity was based on achieving. I learned to do that, not because my parents told me that that's what I need to get their love, but that was my perception. So my whole personality was about achievement and school and doing amazing things on the outside. The problem with that is I didn't know who I was on the inside. So I felt empty. And I think that kids who are I wrote a dissertation about the dangers for adolescents in affluent communities who are pressured to perform at high levels to get into a good college. And that those kids are experiencing a relational trauma because their whole sense of self-worth is based on this getting into a good college. And so if they don't, then it impacts their sense of self. But other situations where people-pleasing develops is if you have alcoholic substance abuse in your family. I want to say divorce, but it's not every divorce ends up impacting kids this way. It's when kids are parentified in a divorce or when kids are parentified in any situation. If you have a parent who has severe mental illness and is not able to show up and act in the parent role, if a child starts to become the parent, or maybe taking care of the siblings or even taking care of the parents, they learn to people please. They learn to act like a chameleon in any situation in order to fit in. And when we do that, we lose the opportunity to develop our inner sense of self. We're so worried about what we're doing on the outside.
And like, what role does that play like in our mental health and our well-being when we lose that sense of self?
So in order to feel like a fully fulfilled whole person, we need to know who we are and what our values are. Otherwise, we're just kind of like a pinball bouncing off of the people around us. Just like the chameleon that I was talking about. If we change who we are in every situation in order to get the people around us to like us, it's about a fear of rejection. Okay? We don't know who we are, so we don't know if we even like ourselves. So we end up in every situation seeking approval from the people around us, sort of like a pinball bouncing off the bumpers. Well, if you live your life that way, then you don't have any concept of who you are. But for instance, if you recognize that your values are in kindness, in humility, achievement even, right? In being a good friend or being a good daughter or brother or sister, and then you go out and you satisfy those values and you act in congruence with those values. You know, maybe being of service is important to you or helping others, but in a way that so that you do it because you want to do it, not because you feel compelled to. That's really the key, is living a life that you want instead of living a life that you feel compelled to live because you're trying to seek approval or avoid rejection from others. When you live in that way, when you live a life in a way that you want to live, then you start to look up to yourself. You start to realize that what happens is you start to realize that you're a pretty good person and you're the kind of person that you would want to be around. And so that self-esteem, comes from that, and we feel whole and grounded and fulfilled.
The practical side of my brain is like, okay, so how does discovering what I want look like, feel like, sound like? And in theory, it makes sense, but in practicality, how would that look like if I'm trying to discover that within myself?
Well, one of the first things that I suggest that people do is think about who your heroes are. And what qualities do your heroes have that you admire? Because all you have to do, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All you have to do is figure out what you want to look like and then do whatever those people are doing. So in other words, if I can't think of anybody, specific, but if you admire somebody who is, very kind and very generous to people, and so then all you have to do is go out and be very kind, maybe smile at people, when you pass them by, or say hello, or maybe hold the door for people, or whatever it might be to demonstrate kindness. All you have to do is go out and start acting kind, and now you're a kind person. It doesn't take it's not like a major overhaul. It's just about identifying what's important to you and then going and living that way.
I remember talking to a neuroscientist, and she was talking about mirror mirroring or neural mirroring, and seeing the things that we like and then implementing and eventually becoming it. So that's interesting how you say we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to see what our heroes are, or who are heroes, and what qualities they exude, and practice those things.
That's one step, but also you can find a values list online. And if you go through and pick, 10 values that are important to you, and then perhaps think about one or two things that you could do to demonstrate those values, and then you go out and do it, all of a sudden you start to become that person. That question, who am I, is such a big question. And when it's out there in a vacuum, it can feel very, very overwhelming. But really, it's just as simple as figuring out who do you admire and why, and what's important to you. What do you want to look like to the world? And then going and living that way. And you start small. I mean, for me, an example, and I don't want to get too personal, but for a long time, I didn't realize that when I would pass people, I didn't say hello to them. I didn't even make eye contact. I was shy. And I realized that I wanted to be friendly. Well, someone who's friendly doesn't look away when you pass somebody in school in the hallways. So I realized in order to be friendly, I just had to make eye contact with people and maybe smile or say hello. And when I started doing that, all of a sudden things shifted for me. And then I did another thing. I let people, at a four-way stop, I always let people go before me. It's no skin off my back. It just makes me feel good. So when you start small, there's a compound effect. You start small and add little steps at a time, and over time, it adds up to big changes.
So I want to pivot and slightly go a little bit deeper. Who are some of your heroes currently, or past heroes?
I mean, the first person who comes up in my mind is Audrey Hepburn. I just think she was so graceful, and she was so service-minded and beautiful and feminine. And so she's one of my heroes. But I love qualities. There are qualities about people that I've encountered in my life that no one would know. People might know. My first boss when I was a lawyer was Mark Garrigus. And he was such a hard worker, and he was so committed to his clients. And I admired that so much. And so I try to emulate him in my work. But it's really just everyday people. It doesn't have to be anybody famous or anybody, that mystical. I will say some of the personal growth gurus like Tony Robbins, or I can't think of anyone else. He's a good example, but working out. If I want to feel good and I want to be energetic, I know I have to go do my walk for the day. Tony Robbins, if I want to be successful and I want to be a heavy hitter, he stays in shape. Mark Garrigus said the same thing: healthy body, healthy mind. So if I want to rise to that, rise up to a certain elevation and elevate myself, working out is a small step towards doing that. It sounds silly, but making your bed. People who are successful make their bed.
That's
Little
profound.
things.
Yes. It's the little things over time. And you talk about the compound effect. Can you break down, like, what does that look like? Making the bed, how else can one compound their way to building more value-based relationship or finding who they are and making themselves someone they look up to?
It's so easy. It's any little thing. For a while, someone mentioned something about putting grocery carts away instead of leaving them in the parking lot. And I started putting I used to just bump it up on the curb so it wouldn't hit a car, but maybe it blocked a parking spot. And I started putting grocery carts away I still do it. But it's those little things. It's putting your dishes in the dishwasher or washing and drying your dishes instead of leaving them in the sink. It's these little teeny steps that it's making a phone call. During the fires, a lot of people, and I called a lot of people too during the LA fires, a lot of people called me and it felt so good. It made me think, I wasn't thinking about how me making a phone call might make someone else feel good. Or even today I was at the gym and this guy I was on the treadmill and he was running 10 miles an hour. It's really, really fast. Super, super fast, but he was running 10 miles an hour for one minute and then walking. And every few minutes he would go back up to 10 miles an hour. And I looked at him like, wow, you're my superhero. And we talked about how hard, he's training, he plays football with guys who are 25 years younger than him. So he needs to be able to keep up with them. And this is how he trains his body to do that. But I just, I said, that's amazing. Like, I couldn't do that. And, when I was leaving, he said, you made my day. And that made my day to make someone else's day. It's little things like that, that make, when you add them up, it makes a difference. And for people who have depression, being friendly to people and doing these little baby steps can help get you out of depression as well. They give you a little bit of a bump, not a bump like a drug bump, but a bump into, higher energy, higher synchronicity, higher vibration. You do these little things, you raise your vibration.
As you're talking, all I could think of is the movie Karate Kid, when he's making him do that initial thing, wax on, wax off. And it's the simple things done over time consistently that compounds into like the good things, like you acknowledging the gentleman who's running 10 miles per hour and then taking a break and then hearing his story, and then even being inspired to not put your cart on the top of the sidewalk so it doesn't take away a spot. But those little things. When people are struggling meeting their own needs and having guilt around that, how do you help guide clients in overcoming those fears and putting themselves first?
Say guilt about not taking care of other people, not people pleasing. My attitude is we are all responsible for ourselves. And that means that the people around us are responsible for themselves as well. Obviously, I'm not talking about the elderly. I'm not talking about children. I'm talking about other adults who are very capable of taking care of themselves. And the thing that often stops us from putting ourselves first and being healthy selfish is we're worried about what the reactions will be from others, how others are going to take the way we're acting. And a lot of times people will say, oh, I have to go to my mother-in-law's house. It's just not worth the argument. You only going there and being angry or frustrated or irritated while you're there is doing nobody any good. And your mother-in-law can handle being disappointed. After a while, she'll get used to it and be fine with it. But really how she feels is none of your business. If you don't want to go, you're not, going and, like I said, being resentful and feeling like a martyr is not going to do anybody any good. And so we have to get comfortable with other people's disappointment. They're responsible for taking care of their own needs. We are not responsible for taking care of someone else's needs. And people adjust. They don't like it at first, but they do adjust, I promise.
You said get comfortable with disappointing people. That is such a, so like as I'm hearing it, and I'm a recovered people pleaser, there's still a sense of discomfort. Like I'm gonna make you feel disappointed in me. So like, what are some ways for us to reframe that mindset for those who can't necessarily receive it as palatable as those who recovered? Like someone who's on that new train of
How do you get comfortable with that?
yeah, how do you get comfortable with that?
Couple things. I just lost my train of thought, but a couple things. We can either put them first and not take care of ourselves, or we can be, and it's going to sound harsh, but act like a grown-up and we're not taking care of ourselves when we put someone else's needs ahead of us, when we show up for someone else and don't show up for ourselves. So we're not acting like a whole person. And so often, no matter what we do, that other person who's expecting us to fulfill their needs, they're not happy whether we do what we do or whether we don't. Often those people are just unhappy all the time. So that's one piece. But if you have a choice between making someone else happy and making yourself happy, who are you going to choose? I say choose yourself first. The other person is responsible for making themselves happy. An example is this. There's this kind of in couples, when we're talking about romantic relationships, there's this whole idea of you complete me. And maybe this will help. This is an unhealthy relationship. This is where if you take this away, now you're not whole. Okay? We don't want to do that to people. We don't want to encourage people to be not whole. The way to go about these relationships is to be whole in yourself, allow the other person to be whole in themselves, and now you're greater together. You're two adult people acting like adults, taking care of yourselves like an adult, and now you have the energy to do really kind things for each other because you want to and feel good about it, rather than taking care of someone else's needs and feeling like a victim or a martyr or resentful. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that 100% answers it. And I've heard about the whole coming together, like both individuals being whole, but the giving from either resentment or giving because of this generosity is what I haven't seen before. So this dynamic, as you mentioned, that's an unhealthy, because we watch Disney and we watch all these love stories and we're so programmed and trained to say, you complete me versus you amplify me or you compliment me. So
yeah, I get excited to be around you, right? I feel so good about life, and then you bring something more that I can't, not that I can't bring to myself, but you make it even better. But we have to be whole. If we're looking for this, we're coming from a place of less than, because as soon as we take that other person away, now we're not whole. So the thing to strive, and we give each other people the opportunity to get whole too when we stop filling in their gaps. Now they have the opportunity to self-seek and to go inside and figure out who they want to be so they can be whole.
So is whole then, would you define whole as someone who's completely healed or someone who's on a journey of healing?
I think whole is living in congruence with who you want to be.
Say more.
It's a journey. You never get there. It's like Maslow's, are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I mean, It's pretty, yeah. So you started, little by little, you build up to your needs, but we're always striving for self-realization. And that's what this is all about. But we need to start seeking self-realization. Self-realization is knowing who you are and who you want to be. But that's a journey. And if you're not on that journey, you'll never get to that pinnacle when as you age. It takes years to figure out. And I encourage people to start now. Who do you want to be? What do you want to look like to the world? Not because you think that's what people want, but because it feels good to you to show up that way. And it feels daunting, but it really takes these little baby steps, just adding, there's a book called The Compound Effect. I believe it's Darren Hardy. And he talks about, making these little teeny tiny changes, and you add them up and they amount to monumental changes. He refers to an airplane, and I forgot what the exact analogy was. But if you're flying an airplane and you're trying to get to Los Angeles, if you move the direction of the nose of the airplane just a little bit, you could end up in Santa Barbara. But it's just a slight tip of the nose, the direction that the plane is going. And it's the same thing for us. If we just tilt our focus on what we're doing just a little bit, it takes us a really long way.
Tilt the focus just a little bit and it takes us a long way. Wow. That is a TED Talk right there. Like, so if people are listening to this podcast and they want to connect with you, Dr. Corey, how and where can they connect with you?
So my website is, you can reach me through my website, and it's www.coreyhirschlcsw.com. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok. My handle on Instagram is dr.corey.hirsch, and I'd love to hear from all of you.
So, Corey, your insight into clarity, mindset, personal development are truly inspiring, and your work in helping people embrace their self-worth and transform their relationship is definitely something we need to practice more. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course, thank you so much. It was really fun.
To our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to follow Corey on all of her platforms. Until next time, stay clear, stay inspired, and keep designing your life with intention. That was fun.